Next up, we have Jenn Schilling, who's going to be speaking to you all about her experience as a data analyst. While I don't think I've ever met Jenn in person. I feel like I know you really well because we've networked online through the Data Book Club, through the Women in Data Viz groups. I know I follow you on like LinkedIn and Instagram. So apologies for any stalking behavior that might have but I've just been incredibly impressed with your thoughtfulness and your insightfulness, and just really, glad to have you here today. Thank you for speaking to all of us.
Oh, thank you so much, Brandy. And thanks, Brandy and Justin, for having me. And thank you all for being here. I'm so excited to get to be part of the Data Career Summit and also to talk to you about my experience as a data analyst. So I don't have any slides to share. I'm just going to talk through my experiences. Please feel free to put some questions in the chat, and hopefully we'll have some time at the end for that. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I got here, so my educational background, some of the different jobs that I've had, and then I'm going to talk about my typical day-to-day currently. Right now, I work as a senior research analyst at the University of Arizona. That's my primary job, and that's what I'm going to talk about in terms of my day-to-day. So I studied math and minored in computer science, and then I got a master's in a branch of applied math called operations research. And operations research is all about optimization and simulation and modeling, as well as some statistics. While I was doing my undergrad degree and my master's degree, I did a bunch of different internships. And one of the things I love about math and about data is that I can work in a number of different industries. And that's what I've done. When I had my internships, I worked in space science, I worked in defense work, I worked at NASA and did food price indices, which was really fascinating. I also worked in the supply chain. And so I got to experience a lot of different industries and kind of experiment and see what I liked. And then in my full-time career, I've again worked in a few different industries. I started out in supply chain, and then I worked in advertising and marketing research, and then I now work in higher education. And along the way there, actually between my time as a statistician working in advertising and market research, and now where I work as an analyst for the University of Arizona, I actually took a little break from doing well, I'm still working with data, but I wasn't working necessarily specifically as an analyst. I worked for a brief period of time with AmeriCorps and worked on college access. And then I actually taught middle school for 2.5 years. And so I got to teach 6th graders about math and applied math and do hands-on learning with them. And then I did 8th graders with engineering. And so that was really cool. And then I got to come back into the data field. And my background in data actually really helped a lot when I was teaching too, because there's a lot of data in education. Like we've got to track grades, we've got to track performance, attendance, like all kinds of stuff. So I guess all of that to say that there's a lot of opportunities in the field of data, and that's what I really, really love. And I saw some questions in the chat about like, how do you figure out like what specific industry to get into or what specific thing to follow? And I really think it's about what you're interested in. And so for me, I really found that I had a passion for education, and working in supply chain, working in advertising, those were wonderful jobs, and I worked with wonderful people, but I didn't feel very passionate about those things. And that's fine. You don't have to feel super passionate about your career, that you can have passions elsewhere in your life. But I really wanted to find that passion in my career. And so getting to apply my data skills in education where I work now is fabulous. So let me tell you a little bit about what I do now. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention about kind of how I got here, because there were some questions about skill building that I saw. So I built skills both within my educational background and within on the job. For example, I didn't learn SQL until I got on the job, and now I use a lot of SQL, but I've built up my experience over the years through my different jobs. Also, you can practice outside of work, right? I really, really enjoy R just for myself. I guess it's for me, making graphs in R is like what Sunny talked about, where I'm like, I'm going to miss dinner because I'm trying to figure out this graph and I really want to get my visualization done. So There's lots of things that you can find outside of work as well. There's lots of data challenges like Tidy Tuesday for R, Makeover Monday for Tableau. There's an organization called Viz for Social Good, where if you want to work with nonprofits and help them visualize their data, it's unpaid. It's a kind of data challenge, but that's another really cool way to build skills. And there's lots of those. Those are just three. But that's some ways that you can kind of build up some skills and also build a portfolio, especially as it seems that a lot of people who are posting in the chat are thinking about transitioning. So that's a way where you can build some skills outside of maybe your regular work, and you can build a portfolio of some of the different data tasks that you can do. So now let me talk to you about some of the different things that I do in my current job as an analyst. One thing that I do is data request fulfillment. So at the university, one of the ways we get data requests, there's lots of ways, but the one that I focus on is at the university, professors apply for grants for their research or for programs. And sometimes they need data about the institution. So they need data on the number of students in specific degree programs and whether they came back for a second year, whether they graduated in 4 years, things like that. So I help support those data requests by providing, or support those grants by providing data for those professors. And so they can put those into their grants. And to do those, I use a combination of SQL, R, and Excel. And those are kind of the technical tools that I use. And then another really key part of that is communicating with the clients and understanding their data needs, and also understanding and helping support their data literacy. And what do they know what they're asking for? Because sometimes they don't, because it's kind of complicated. Data is complicated, especially data at a university. That's something I learned when I transitioned to working for the university a few years ago. Data at the university can be very complicated. There's lots of different ways to define things. It's not as easy as we sold this many units and we purchased this many units and then here's our net revenue. And so there's lots of different ways to count students. I mean, not to say that there aren't different ways to count things in other fields, but what I have found working at a university is that we have lots of different ways to count students. You have to be very specific about how do you want to count this population and what do you mean by a 1-year retention rate? I know what I mean by that, but what do you mean by that? So there's a lot of translation, I think, that happens in the data careers. I'm trying to keep a glancing on the chat, and I did see someone ask if I could repeat some of the data challenges. And I know I speak quickly, so I'm sorry I've said that so fast. The ones that I mentioned were Tidy Tuesday, which is an R-based one, Makeover Monday, which is Tableau-based. And then the other one I mentioned is Viz for Social Good, which you can do in any tool. And that's just 3. There are others out there as well, but those are just the 3 that I mentioned. Another thing that my job entails is creating dashboards. And so I was responsible for creating my university's COVID-19 dashboard. Both, we had a public-facing one and we had an internal one that reported to the senior leadership every night for what our current status was of students who were testing positive, faculty, employees who were testing positive. We were doing wastewater testing, all of this stuff. So I build dashboards like that. I build internal dashboards that have information about faculty salary reports. I've gotten to work a lot on demographics data and diversity data. And so we've been publishing some public-facing dashboards that provide information about the demographics of the students at the institution, as well as the faculty and the staff. And so for that, I use 2 different tools. For all of our public-facing dashboards, I build everything in Tableau. And my university has a Tableau server that we support those on. And then I use Tableau Desktop to build all of them. And then the other tools that we use, Oracle Analytics Server, and that is our internal BI tool. I haven't come across very many people who use that as a BI tool, but that's the one that we use at our university. And so we have 2 different business intelligence or BI tools that we're using there to build out dashboards. Another part of my job is building out reports. And so these are more kind of PDF reports that we generate once a year, showing some information about a specific area. So one is that we're doing a report on sponsored research at the university. So we are looking at how many people, like how many grants are we getting in, what funding are we getting in, what proportion of the faculty are involved with research. Another one that I'm working on right now is going to be our diversity at a glance report, which is going to be showing demographics of students, demographics of faculty, demographics of staff at the institution. And so these are slightly different than the dashboards because the dashboards update regularly. We have to do some maintenance on them, things like that. These reports are an annual one-time, build it out, and then we generate it, and annually we'll update all of the data. Another area that I work in is I do some data science and machine learning projects, and that is, I would say it's kind of typical for an analyst role. It's a little bit unique because I do have a really strong background in applied math and statistics and in data science. So that is a slightly unique part of my role in terms of like a general analyst role. And so there I'm doing things like forecasting enrollment, predicting the net tuition revenue. I've done simulations to to estimate the impact of different scholarship changes. We're doing a text analysis right now on course surveys, and I supervise a graduate assistant who's worked on some analysis to investigate the progress of female students in STEM. And for that, I primarily work in R and use SQL for pulling data as well. I should have mentioned for the building reports, I didn't mention the tools that I use. There I use Tableau mainly for the visualizations, SQL to pull the data, Excel sometimes if we're building out like tables for the reports, and then InDesign too is what I've been using most recently to kind of take all the visualizations and put them all together into a single report. And then I also do some data analysis projects, which require some additional statistical analysis and exploration and experimentation with different graphs and charts. And I just saw a question come in saying, how do you do so many things? That's one of the things I really like about my job is that I get to work on lots of different projects, and I don't do all these things at the same time. This is not like everything I do in one day. For example, last week I was really focused on the data request fulfillment part and data literacy, working with some professors to get their grant proposals supported. This week I have been working on, actually I've been doing some reviewing of some dashboards for people and giving feedback. That's another part that I do because I have an expertise in data visualization and I'm a senior member of my team. I do a lot of kind of support and feedback and training. So I've been doing that recently. So I definitely don't do all these things in one day. I just kind of wanted to give a perspective of the different types of things that I work on. So with those data analysis projects, that requires some statistical analysis and then some different visualizations. So these are things where I did some analysis of looking at what's the relationship between parking permits and employee salaries, because they're looking at evaluating whether or not how we can change parking permit policies to better support people. Also, I really love that somebody said I deserve a raise. I'm going to send that to my boss later. And another thing I do in that area is I got to do a statistical analysis of different academic characteristics of incoming students and their impact on student success. So if a student has a certain GPA coming in, what can that tell us about their success at the university? If they've met certain course requirements in terms of their high school experience, like what does that look like? And so for those kinds of things, I'm using SQL and R as well. And I think I'm getting close to my end of time, so I don't want to go over too much. But I've talked about a lot of technical skills, and I just wanted to touch on some of the maybe not so technical skills that are really important for my job. I do a lot of communicating with people about projects, data expectations, prototypes, and that's both with my clients and stakeholders and with my colleagues. I work a lot with my colleagues on I need help pulling this data. Can you check my numbers for me, please? And we do the same, right? Like I look over some of their visualizations and things like that. So there's a lot of support. I work in quite a large department. There's about 50 of us in my department. And so there's a lot of support and working with people on that. I'm not working just like by myself all the time. And I really like that. As you might be able to tell, I like to talk. So it's nice to get to talk to people and interact with people. And I really do think those technical skills are important, but it's equally important to be able to communicate my findings, discuss data with people, understand client needs and requirements, and also translate findings into understandable insights and takeaways. That translation is really important both ways. Like I need to translate what somebody is asking for in terms of what I actually create and what data I provide them. And then I need to translate those findings, that data back to them to help them understand the insights and what they should do from that. And just briefly, a couple of challenges that I've run into. I've already mentioned that there's lots of definitions with data. And so I think that that can be a challenge everywhere. I found that that's been a particular challenge working at the university, just that we define things in different ways and people mean different things when they say the word retention. And so it's really important to get clear on, well, what are you actually asking for? And what am I actually providing? And do those match up? Another challenge is data literacy of people requesting the information. And again, that's due to some of those complex definitions, but helping make sure that the people who are consuming our data understand what they're looking at. It's also challenging to sometimes figure out the right data source and figure out how to validate it against a known data source, making sure I'm using the right information. That's just because we have so much data, and we have some data experts, but we need to we're working on how we document all of that out so more of our analysts can access that information without having to go through a few specific people to be like, what does this column mean? And is this the right one to pull? And so those are just a few of the challenges that come up. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a picture of some of the things that a data analyst does. Again, those aren't everything that I do within one day, but those are a lot of those. That's my kind of general set of tasks that I work on. And thanks again to Brandy and Dustin for having me. Thank you all so much for being here. And thanks for all the questions. I know there were a ton in the chat, so.
There were. And, if I could, Dustin, I hope it's okay. I'm going to actually chime in with one of my own real quick. So obviously, Jenn, you're kind of here to speak to, the data analyst role, but a lot of what you talked about, and you obviously have a background in math and statistics, and I guess I'm curious, do you feel that the data analyst role and the data scientist role are kind of closely related and they can kind of ebb and flow from maybe one to another? Or how do you, what's your thought in the relationship between those two roles?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. I think it depends a little bit on like an individual's background and skill set. I will say in where I am right now, we have a data scientist within my department, and they have a very specific role that is different from a data analyst role. I was a data analyst and then a senior data analyst, and now I have this title of senior research analyst, what kind of blends the two, but I'm the only person in my department who has the title of research analyst. So my job, that blend for me, at least and I can only speak to like this experience in terms of that, but like that is quite, that is unique. I think a lot of the things I talked about are what analysts do in my department: fulfilling data requests, building dashboards, building out reports, maintaining dashboards, communicating with clients and stakeholders, like all of that. Really, the unique stuff is more when I work on some of the machine learning models and when I do some of the more kind of statistical analyses. That's kind of the separation that we have, at least within my department. I think some data analysts probably do some more of that statistical work, and maybe the division is more on the machine learning type stuff that kind of stays in the data science area. But yeah, that's a great question. I think there can be a blur between them. There certainly is for me, but again, it does depend kind of on the structure of the organization, and I think on an individual's skill set. And that doesn't necessarily mean that someone couldn't build those skills, right? Just depending on like what you want to do too, and what you like doing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think it's such a great answer. Thank you. Yeah, I feel the same way. I think you kind of start with, I mean, there's so many different variations of the data analyst, right?
Yeah.
And somebody who's beginning might have a smaller set of skills than somebody who's been in the field for as long as you have, and bringing that that research and academic background. So really interesting insights. Thank you.
Thank you,
Dustin. I'm curious if we have any questions that maybe one additional question that you found particularly compelling.
Yeah, sure. I did want to share just some of the general sentiment. Your experience, Jenn, did resonate with a lot of folks. They thought it was really cool.
I've been really grateful for my experience. That's why I said I like, not that everyone has to go into like education and teach for a few years, but I think that the data, what I was saying before about like how data lets you do all kinds of different things. Like if you find a specific industry and like you really enjoy that and you want to kind of stay in that industry, like go for it. But you can also explore a lot of different stuff. I mean, I haven't moved up into a manager role, and part of that, and I have been working, like it's been 10 years since I got my master's. And so part of that is because I've moved around so much. And also because I like doing analyst type work. But there's a great opportunity there. Sorry, I think you were just mentioning a comment and then I was like, I'm going to respond. I'm so sorry.
Please do. Yeah, it captured the sentiment of a lot of folks, I noticed. So I wanted to share that. Let's wrap it up with one question that I thought was a good one from Joe. A lot of questions kind of this variety that have been, coming into the chat during Andy, Sunny, and yourself's presentation. So at one point you mentioned being a statistician. How is that different from data science, data analysts, data engineering?
Yeah, that's a good question. And again, and we're going to hear from Justin in a minute about data engineering. And I think that there's, to me, I will see what Justin thinks, but to me, there's less blur there between data engineering and analyst and science than there can be between data science and data analyst. But yeah, so my statistician work, I would say that was mostly actually similar to being a data scientist. It's just the role, the job title was statistician. So in that role, I was running statistical models on survey data and to better support the clients that we worked with in terms of measuring the impact of their advertising campaigns. And so we were, I would say broadly, I was doing data science, but my title wasn't data scientist. To me, that role, my title was statistician, but I feel that it was pretty equivalent to a data scientist type role.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jenn.
Thank you.
For taking time to do this. I know it was helpful to many. I've got, when I look over at my comments since I last pulled up, there's 34 more. So I definitely apologize. I appreciate all of the comments and questions from everyone. We definitely will try to get to as many as we can. To all presenters, not just to Jenn, but everyone, if you'd like to, close out a StreamYard after you're done presenting and go into the event, feel free to address some of these questions in the chat. I'm sure folks would love to hear from you in that way as well.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, everybody. And everyone, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. And if you're interested in data visualization or R specifically, that's the stuff that I share. And you can find links to different things that I have available on LinkedIn. So thank you so much to Brandon and Dustin. I really enjoyed being here. So I really, really appreciate the invite to speak. Thank you.